So this is our agenda. So just a brief outline of what we're going to be talking about. So again, just a reminder to set up those accounts in your handout. We'll be using Beatoven, I'm not sure, but that's what it's called, and Descript. And make sure you join the LinkedIn group as well. We'll be talking about opportunities and threats for journalism with AI in audio. We'll do our practical elements, and then we'll also look at some ethical and legal considerations for radio and podcasting. And then we'll have a bit of discussion, and we'll have discussion throughout this whole thing, and I'll have to keep checking in on the chat as well. And of course, Andrew will be joining us, which I'm really looking forward to. So introduce yourself in the chat, and of course, use it to ask questions. Links to the session recordings, the slides, the handout, and the homework activity will be emailed to you after the class and posted to the closed LinkedIn group as well. And we'll go through all of that later today as well. And we'd love you to post your homework in the closed LinkedIn group. So we've got the link in the chat box there. And I'll be able to give you feedback then. So you've got 4 weeks for that. And if you post in the LinkedIn group, then you'll get peer-to-peer feedback. So we can share and have a look at what each other is doing. And it's a safe space. You know, we're all here to help each other, which is the beauty of these sessions. All right, to start us off, I wanted to look at some of the wonderful opportunities AI is actually bringing us, but also some of the malicious uses and how we can best spot the fakes. So without going into the history of AI, it is worth understanding the major shift that occurred with generative AI. And of course, we've long been using artificial intelligence. So in radio, this might be in programming, scheduling, song selection. In podcasting, I use AI to remove filler words, improve the sound quality, and to make transcripts. The key difference is that until a couple of years ago, machine learning was largely limited to predictive models, and these were used to observe and classify patterns in content. But generative AI is able to actually create an image or a text descriptions on demand by using prompts. So the most famous of these is probably ChatGPT. So for audio, you can also use prompts to generate music, to translate something into a different language, and to create human-like voices from scratch, or even clone your own voice, which we will be looking at today. So I use generative AI in podcasting to suggest episode titles, social media posts relating to episode content, and show notes. Although I have to say they're not always very good. So I really treat them as more ideas and first drafts rather than the final product, but it keeps improving. So we will see how things change. So how easy is it to actually spot a deep fake? Now, I'm just going to stop sharing and hand it over to Karen.
Terrific. And do you want to just talk us through what this is, Kirsten?
Yeah, so I'm just wanting you to have a look firstly at it, and then I think we'll have a chat about it and see what you can spot, what might be a bit wrong about it.
Here we go.
Українці, шановні захисники, бути президентом виявилося не так вже й легко. Я змушений приймати складні рішення. Спочатку я вирішив повернути Донбас. Настав час глянути правді у вічі. Не вийшло.
So we'll go back to my screen now, and this is clearly an example of a deep fake. You probably spotted it. Ukrainians were not fooled by this one. So if you notice, Zelensky's voice was deeper than usual. He doesn't really move in the body, which was a bit strange. And look, this one was easily debunked and taken offline and off YouTube. But this type of deepfake is really the best case scenario in that it was so obvious, so crudely not Zelensky. And some actually argue that these crude deepfakes allow Facebook and Google to have easy wins by say they're doing something by taking things down, when in fact there are more sophisticated deepfakes going unnoticed. Other researchers argue that even bad deepfakes can be effective to a point because the way that our brains work when it comes to confirmation bias. So certainly a concern, but that's a bad one. This one is a bit more sophisticated, and it's really concerning how accessible voice cloning and AI-generated avatars are. And according to a SumSub report, the number of deepfakes across the world actually rose by 10 times from 2022 to 2023. Stop sharing again and hand it over, and we'll play you this video so you can have a look at a more sophisticated version of a deepfake and a deepfake avatar.
Over the last few weeks, we've been seeing a series of videos that all kind of sound the same, that have popped up on social media in Mali. Here's an example.
Regardez ce Français. Vous l'avez bien vu. Regardez le même Français au milieu des djihadistes. C'est lui qui fournit les armes aux djihadistes, c'est lui qui donne toujours la position de l'armée malienne.
Videos that have been badly edited and have been overlaid with a computer-generated voiceover have recently become very popular in Mali and have been shared on WhatsApp, YouTube and Facebook. The aim is to spread false information with a format that's quick and easy to make. Let's take another look at that video. This photo of the French writer and philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy is supposedly proof that he was collaborating with jihadists in Mali. But if you do a screen capture of the photo and a reverse image search, you can find the photo in French media outlets. It was taken in 2007 in Sudan, when Lévy went to speak to a commander of the Sudan Liberation Army. So nothing to do with Mali at all. Well, that video was quite basic, but sometimes these sorts of videos can use even more sophisticated technology.
Bonjour chers internautes. Vous vous rappelez de la lettre des 23 millions d'euros que Macron avait proposée aux traites de la nation. Du début de l'assise jusqu'à la fin, vous ne verrez jamais l'un d'entre eux. Ils ont déjà pris une partie de l'argent et Emmanuel Macron a l'œil sur eux.
So there's a TV presenter with what looks like quite a professional TV studio background. Now what he's saying is that France bribed Malian politicians so that they wouldn't appear at a national consultation investigating last year's coup in the country. This is false and actually comes from a badly photoshopped letter by Macron that made the rounds online in September 2021. But what we're interested in is the video format. This is what is called a deep fake. It was created on the website Synthesia, which helps you make your own video
We'll
using...
just leave it there. And all of the resources will be on your handout if you want to follow up with any of those. And I'll take the screen back. Thank you. So this is where it came from. You might be able to spot our presenter in here. Jason down the bottom right hand is the presenter. So it's from Synthesia.io, and our presenter is one of 160 avatars from this company. And these avatars can speak in multiple accents, they can speak in multiple languages, and they're generally used by companies for in-house training and education videos, and that's what the company is marketed as. Now, Synthesia says using avatars for political purposes violates its terms and conditions. And in that example, the Mali deepfake case, Synthesia said the avatar we now know as Jason had been downloaded before they could ban the account. So you can see how easy it is for the bad people to unlock some pretty sophisticated technology. And if you saw the David Beckham video, that malaria one, it was Synthesia who actually did that as well. So here's another case study, because this is pure audio, which, you know, I would probably argue it's easier to fool people with because so many of the deepfake giveaways are often visual. So this is an example of audio, and I'll stop share here. And it was released on the first day of the UK Labour Party conference, and it's of Sir Keir Starmer, or at least that's what we're led to believe.
What you're about to hear is not Sir Keir Starmer's voice.
No, I'm sick of it.
But it does sound like him, allegedly berating his staff.
The tablet. Sake. I literally told you, didn't I? Sake.
This fake AI-generated audio clip of the Labour leader was posted online right at the start of his party's conference. It's already been viewed more than 1 million times online, and we don't know how many of those people believed what they were hearing, but it's led to experts to say yet again that we need to better understand and regulate AI, with one MP calling this a threat to democracy.
Yes, pretty convincing. And I want you to kind of have a think about what makes that potentially so convincing, you know, and I suppose from a perspective of a journalist, you know, if you get given this or you hear this online and you think, oh, wow, great, a politician's, you know, absolutely going off, what makes you kind of think that this is real or this is not real? So I thought the background of this voice of this was interesting. So it's really noisy, and that could make it sound believable, but that's, you know, one way to kind of hide the fact that it isn't real. And the way that it was done was through voice cloning, which we will look at. So they can use text to speech, so basically write anything that they want, and use the voice to say it, which is what happened here. But there are subtle signs that it's not right. The speech patterns were slightly unnatural, and there's some odd pauses there. And there's a lot of background noise, as I mentioned. And the biggest red flag, and this really comes down to sort of journalism 101, is probably that it came from a Twitter account with a long history of spreading unsubstantiated claims about Keir Starmer. So despite this, though, the deepfake still, you know, gained traction. But I think it's worthwhile remembering those kind of what was the source questions are always really important. Here's another interesting case, which really makes me think about what about our own voices as people who are on radio, TV. This is the case of Liz Bonnen from the BBC. She's a science presenter, and it's particularly alarming because it was a company that was tricked into thinking they were dealing with her, and they were sent voice messages with her voice, and they thought that she was happy to endorse one of their products, which happened to be an insect repellent online. And so Liz found out about this when she suddenly saw her image endorsing and her voice endorsing an insect repellent, or rather just her image, not a voice. It was the voice messages that were used to convince the company that it was legitimate. So the CEO had been scammed out of money, and Liz's profile had been used without her consent. So how do you actually spot a deep fake? Some pretty good advice from the eSafety Commissioner about scams. And this is mainly about scams, but it's also useful for us. So number one, they say for visual deep fakes, look for blurring, cropped effects or pixelation, particularly around the mouth, eyes and necks. Look at the skin too. There can be inconsistency or discoloration. Number two, think about the video or audio as a whole. Are there glitches, sections of lower quality, changes in the lighting or background? Is the sound badly synced with the mouth? Are there irregular movements? Are there gaps in the storyline or the speech? And thirdly, think about the context. Would this person really say this? It's that old kind of, you know, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Is it possible for them to even say that at this time, at this place? And what's the origin of this audio or video? Again, going back to the source. So there are some tools to spot deepfakes. AI created the problem, and there's AI out there to solve it. Now, note that I am not endorsing any of these tools. But on the left-hand side, there's a list of some of the tools that are available, and they're using really advanced AI algorithms in different ways to detect fakes. So Sentinel, for instance, uses AI to analyze digital media and determine if it's been manipulated by providing a visualization of that manipulation. Then there are other tools that focus on the mismatch between the sound and the movements of the lips in a video. So there's lots of different ways that they're trying to spot them. But we can't just leave it up to the tools to check it for us. And many of these have high accuracy, but like any technology, of course, the bad people will continually be more sophisticated in their fakes. So there needs to be other measures. And just one I really wanted to highlight was the digital content credentials. So when you see content credentials logo, which you can see on the screen there, it means you can click on it to reveal the creation information, including what AI software was used. So it's a new open AI tool being developed, and it also has a feature called Verify, which you can drop content into to see if it has content credentials attached. And so then you can see the background of it. Big brands like Microsoft and Adobe have signed up to this. So it's likely that we'll start to see this icon more often. Of course, AI in audio is not always for evil. It can be used for good. So enhanced storytelling, connection, and even bringing the past back to life. Got an example here. You might know the British actor Michael York from movies such as Cabaret, Logan's Run, and Austin Powers. And he's particularly well known for his beautiful voice and cadence of speech. However, a medical condition called amyloidosis has caused his speech to be significantly impaired. But Gen AI has come to the rescue and it's been able to restore his voice on voiceovers. It's not quite to how it was. You'll still hear it sounds a little bit raspy, but it has a very close likeness. So Michael York participated in a project using technology from a company called Respeecher. And I'll stop sharing now so you can actually hear about it. So it was a health awareness campaign for the condition that he has. And you'll just have a listen to how his voice has been recreated using Respeecher's algorithm.
Amyloidosis awareness. Throughout our lifetime, our DNA codes for the production of small molecules called proteins. These proteins provide the structure and function for nearly all of life's biological processes. Once proteins are made in our cells, they naturally fold into a particular shape.
I'll just pause that there. And then I'm trying to get to the top of the screen, and it's closed captioning. There we go. Click. There we go. And then we're just playing these two case studies. So this is the source voice and then the converted voice. Do you want to just talk us through, Kirsten? This is Respeecher. So it's taking a source and then it's converting it into something that's perhaps more conventionally listenable in these sorts of, yep. So is that correct?
Yeah. So Respeecher has developed its own algorithm, and but essentially it's using a mixture of a source voice, which is like an actor, and then Michael York's old voice from his previous movies, and then his current speech saying things, and they've merged it together. So this is the source voice.
Numbness or tingling in the hands or feet, as well as carpal tunnel syndrome, lumbar spinal stenosis, and bicep bunching.
So clearly not Michael York, and this is the converted voice.
Numbness or tingling in the hands and feet, as well as carpal tunnel syndrome, lumbar spinal stenosis, and bicep bunching.
So pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's supposed to be sort of halfway between his current speaking voice and a generated voice.
And I couldn't find any examples of his current voice, and it might be that he doesn't want it out there. So I don't know what he sounds like at this stage. I'll take the screen back, and just in response to that question earlier, I won't recommend any tools because I'm not overly across the tools, except to say that there are a lot out there. Like there are a lot of sort of startups and companies doing this. And then you've got your bigger brands that have tools that are looking at this too. So like your McAfee and your security kind of ones. So have a look at them and see what works, because algorithms spot different things. And I think it's a space that's just going to be growing exponentially, I would guess. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. So here's another cool one, which is Bear Grylls. And you can see that Gen AI is being used for language translation. So that can potentially make news and content more accessible. And this was Bear Grylls. I'll stop share and give it back to Corinne so we can actually hear it. Was used to give a message of support to Ukraine in a supposed unique way.
Who are helping our education company Becoming X to create a free platform for Ukrainian schools to help students to get ahead, to succeed. So I'm going to share the rest of this message with you guys in Ukrainian. По-перше, мені складно навіть уявити, тяжко зараз багатьом з тих, хто дивиться це відео. Але я хочу сказати, що ми думаємо про вас кожного дня. І ваша мужність так надихає мільйони людей по всьому світу.
Interesting. So you can see that it was Bear Grylls' voice. Obviously, they hadn't done anything with the movement of his mouth. So he just did a video speaking in English, and the company had changed his voice to make him speak Ukrainian, which is pretty cool. And for audio kind of focused things, you can tell many people are already going to be onto this, and Spotify is one of them. And Spotify announced in September last year that it would leverage OpenAI's new voice generation technology called Whisper to match the original speaker's style. So that means a podcast originally recorded in English can now be released in other languages while keeping the distinctive speech characteristics of that person. So currently there are only a handful of podcasts that are available. You can go look them up now through this pilot. So if you go into voice translations on Spotify, this is what you'll find. It looks like this. And they've just started with Spanish, French, and German translations. And just a quick side note, so Whisper is OpenAI, so you can access that yourself and you can use it to create programs for your own systems. It helps if you've got a bit of coding know-how, I have to admit. But Whisper is OpenAI, and that's what Spotify is using. So another exciting prospect for AI in audio is the efficiencies it can give us in our own workflows. And there's a radio station in Portland in the US, which has become what's believed to be the world's first to create an AI radio personality. So Live 95.5 created an AI version of one of their real presenters, Ashley Alinska, who they dubbed AI Ashley. Now, the radio station said it will use AI-produced segments using the artificial version of Ashley when there's breaking news and that Ashley is not there at the time. It's interesting, isn't it? But AI personalities can actually now be used to make a phone call. You can hear them banter with each other, and you can hear them even banter with a phone caller and deliver information. But you'll be pleased to hear that the real Ashley still has her job presenting the morning show. And I've got some links where you can kind of see a video of that later. But I wanted to show you this, because how would you feel about an entire AI radio program? So AI Ashley was developed through a company called Futuri Audio AI, formerly known as Radio GPT. And one of its services is able to create a localized radio program through AI. So they've got AI co-hosts, it's got local ads, local weather, special segments, and news and content like you'd hear on a local radio station. And I wanted to give you a taste of this, and I'll stop sharing now. There we are. So you can hear a little bit of a totally AI, two bots having a good old chat as your local radio presenters.
Or you would if Zoom's controls weren't right in the way of the play button. Here we go.
Good morning, rise and shine. It's Jen and Jake turning the mundane into magic, or at least they like to think so.
Hey there, I'm Jenny.
And I'm Jake.
We're sprinkling a little sunshine into your morning routine. Jake, how's the vibe in your world today?
Oh, it's all rainbows and unicorns, Jenny. Literally. My niece insisted I have a unicorn sticker on my forehead, so here I am, rocking the unicorn magic.
Oh, I don't think I can listen to any more of that. But I do have to ask you a question before we move on, Kirsten. Examples like that, is someone typing the script? In other words, how's that being put together?
I don't think they'd be typing the script. So my short is, I don't know how that one was done, but you would do it by an algorithm of feeding an algorithm about local things, and you would create these personalities, and these personalities can grow over time. So the algorithm would shape who they are. You're a funny, young, 25-year-old guy who's obviously has a niece who likes unicorns. I mean, in the comments there, I saw yuck, yuck, yuck. I mean, it's ridiculous listening to someone tell a story about their family member when it's not real anyway. So they'd be building on that, and I'll answer that.
Yeah. I suppose we can maybe address the cringe element a little bit now. I think one of the reasons why, we as journalists feel the yuck and the cringe and the is that this really speaks to the heart of what we do, that we are our voices, we are our faces, as well as the stories that we tell. And I remember maybe 18 months ago or so, there was a piece in The Economist that was looking at different industries and their level of exposure to disruption from AI. And journalism came up as 100% exposed. And so there are elements in which this offers opportunities, but it also, I think, makes people deeply uncomfortable. And it's good to perhaps acknowledge that, and we can draw more of that out in the Q&A, which will be coming up in a little while. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there are some natural fits, advertising, you can make jingles really easily now with this sort of stuff and scheduling. But will a chat between an AI host, come off? I mean, it's about connection, and you can't kind of AI your way out of connection. That's my personal view. But there is technology where you can even have real callers interacting with an AI host. You can have an AI host interacting with a real person. Yeah, do we want it? But there's also, so Futuri is a company, obviously, and they also have a product called Topic Pulse, and it lets you know what's trending on social media, breaking news, and then it offers you idea starters and even first drafts of content based on what your audience cares about. So that's part of the algorithm. You tell it what your audience is. And it can create video content for social media and tag and organize stories for radio programming and podcasts. I haven't actually seen this feature in action, so I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I think that it really gives an interesting insight into our workflows and how they change, that it's probably going to be this all-in dump and using AI in all those different ways of how we put our radio and our socials and all of those things together. And another good tool worth mentioning is called Audio Stack. You can literally just add in a prompt and it will generate you a high-quality advertisement or promo. So time for our practical session, which is quite exciting. You can generate music, and I'm sure if you're a musician, that's probably not a very exciting prospect, but there's some interesting applications for what we do potentially. So I wanted to have a look at that. We're going to be using Beatoven or Beatoven. I mean, it's a play on Beethoven, so I guess that's how you say it. And I will get Corinne to share a screen because I've done a demo video for you so you can watch it. And I want you to do it in real time with me if you can. So bring up your Beatoven. You can do it on your phone. I find it super easy to do on my phone. You can do it on desktop too. And you can do it for free. You just can't download the music that you create. But I'll step you through in not an AI version of me, just a pre-recorded version of me.
And before I hit play on that, folks, if you want to download this and have a look, so perhaps if you're on a laptop and you want your the screen that we're showing right now on one side and a demo on the other, just go to beatoven.ai, and it's beatoven.ai. So it's super easy to find, and just click the download. And you can also, of course, do this as a catch up later if you like to go step by step. I do. And the recording for this session will be available on our website by the weekend or sooner. As soon as I can get it cut and uploaded, you'll have access to it. So that's the plan. I'm so grateful, Kirsten, that you've made the recordings here just to really step people through. So let me just do this, and I'll also make it full screen.
So this is the homepage of Beatoven. Just click sign in if you've signed up already. Sign up there if you haven't. So you start with a prompt. You can generate a prompt. That's just going to be a random prompt. Of course, you're going to write one, but generate a prompt is good to learn how to talk to this machine. So here's an example: soft piano ambient music for a nature documentary. Boss deep energetic vocals, choir medieval music for a war scene. Jazz hip hop music for a product demo video. So you get the idea that you want to say what the music is and what it's for. You can say the style, you can say it's rock. So for our particular podcast introduction music, I'm going to say mysterious. So you can kind of describe the emotions. Eerie introduction music for a podcast about escaping. You can be that specific. You could even add in the style of a famous artist if you really want it to sound like that. You could give it a specific tempo. Musicians, now's your time to shine. You could describe some instruments you want. I'm going to say using deep piano chords and acoustic sounds. You know, you could put electronic, and you can put the length as well. I'll say 2 minutes long. Okay, then just compose track. And this process takes about 20 to 30 seconds. What we can see here on this screen is one of the main tracks down the bottom, and then it's also generating us some alternate tracks on the right-hand side there. So at the moment, it's got an emotion that's assigned to it that says scary, and we can change that. But let's just hear what this track sounds like as scary. Okay, let's hear some alternate tracks. So the one you click is the one that jumps down there. Now I think scary is a little bit too much, so I'm going to change the emotion. So you can see there's quite a lot there: sad, calm, motivational, happy. I might change it to tense. Okay, so we hit recompose the track. But with the magic of editing, I have made it a quicker process for you. Let's try it now with the tense emotion. Not bad. We can hear some alternate tracks. That one sounded a little bit disjointed, which can happen with this thing. So you can change the instruments down there. You can change the genre. Currently it's cinematic, and you can change the tempo. So you can make it slow, medium, fast. I might edit the instruments and turn off. You can see they're all on. I might just turn off percussion just by clicking on it. See how that sounds. So I quite like the cinematic genre, but if I wanted to edit it, you can see there's different things. I can make it sound like rock, I can make it sound indie, R&B, electronic, and then click apply. Tempo, slow, medium, fast. Let's try it medium. Now you have to recompose the track. Okay, here we go. Not bad. Sounds quite suspenseful. I think that could perhaps work for some background music. Just going to hear a couple of alternate tracks. And you'll get 4 here, but if you didn't like any of them, you can actually hit get new tracks and it'll give you a whole other 4 to try. I quite like that. I think that's a winner. I am going to select that track as my own. I can download it right now. And that's how you use Beatoven. There we go.
Thanks, Kirsten. That was great.
Thank you. I was watching the chat. We've had some good chat going on in there about it. A good question about, are these music pieces all royalty free? And then we had a bit of a copyright chat going on as well, and we will touch on copyright. So technically they are royalty free. And so you'd have to pay a subscription to the app. and then you can download the music. But we will cover this in our copyright discussion. Basically, in Australia, it's really untested about where do you draw the line as to, who owns something. If you wrote the code to an algorithm that creates music, do you then own that music? Do you own the music if you just created it? These are all questions we haven't solved. And I think they're also questions we need to talk about ethically as journalists and what we would use on our own podcasts. Would you rather have a piece that's crafted for you and use an actual soundscape or a musician if you were making a podcast?
And it also depends on your show. I mean, for example, if you're a local show, or you're a show about a particular area or community or so on, it's it's always lovely to commission someone to make a piece of music, and that's not necessarily terribly expensive over time, especially if you set it against the cost of an ongoing subscription to an app. So sometimes it's more cost effective, and it's also more authentic. It's really a question for the producer.
Kerry has got an interesting point about academic journals saying they won't accept images generated by AI due to copyright concerns. And yeah, who knows what the future holds if you do create something now and then a year from now, academic journals, or it could be, YouTube and Spotify and Apple might say, we're not accepting it. You might find yourself in a bit of a problem. So things to think about, and we will come back to this. So
just before you move on, the rest of that question is, how does the Walkley Foundation feel about using music generated by AI versus licensed or commissioned royalty-free music? We don't currently have programs that deal specifically with those things, but we do have awards, for example, and scholarships and fellowship programs, and we do have an AI policy on those, which sits on the application form for each individual program. And I think it's fair to say that for us also, it's evolving. It's the technology changes almost every week. What's possible changes all the time. And then also, through programs like this training program and at universities, and there are some wonderful international programs as well to help people learn how to use them. The more adept we get, the more people feel more comfortable using tools, and then the more they sort of, I don't want to make this sound pejorative, I just can't think of a better word at the moment, the more they creep into our production processes. It's, I think, what you're talking about there, Kirsten, about reverse engineering that process if you had to, if a platform said, oh, we won't host it anymore, or, a publisher said, oh, we're not going to have that kind of content. You think, oh, I used some of that back in 2023, now it's 2028, and I've got a problem. It's moving so quickly. Sorry to interrupt, and I'll pass back to you.
No, thank you. I'll share my screen again. So this is the sort of fictional podcast that I was working on, and I will give this to you in your homework so you can have a play around with it. You can come up with your own podcast concept, or you can have a look at this one and be inspired by creating a piece of intro music and a piece of background music. And then I'll get you to share your thoughts in the LinkedIn group about what prompts worked, because you won't be able to share your music unless you sign up and pay for a subscription. But you can have a chat about what worked and whether you liked what you created. And that's my process there. I won't go through it now, but it'll be in your handout as well, and the video and everything. But it's pretty intuitive, so I think you'll be fine. And this was a bit of a discussion, but I feel like we've already had a bit of a discussion, Corinne, unless there's any other comments perhaps about the music. Did anyone actually do this with me in real time and can share perhaps in the chat right here and right now what prompts worked, or do you think you could actually create something usable through that particular app? And there are others, by the way. There are others that, you can have a voice, you can have a singer, you can sort of create songs almost and tell it you want it to sound like Taylor Swift.
There's some feedback to say, yes, the music was pretty bad.
Oh, great.
And also someone has shared a link to their track, which folks, you're very welcome to click on. I suppose Just semi-mindful of time. What I would also suggest is the closed LinkedIn group that we've created is only ever as good as folks posting into it. I've set aside some time this weekend to go back through some of the sessions that we've run and do my homework. But everyone who registers for these sessions receives a handout which has a link, as Kirsten says, to some tasks. And the more we practice, the better we get. And we'd love to hear your thoughts in that chat box. Back to you, Kirsten.
Fabulous. So we're going to do another practical element, which is voice cloning. And I will stop sharing, and Corin's going to play another video. Again, me doing a demo, which just saves us on time because it takes time to process. But I just want you to watch this one rather than doing it with me because it's a bit tricky to do. So just watch this one and get an idea on how to clone your voice. I'm using a program called Descript, which you can use for loads of different things. I love it. I don't get paid by them anyway. I'm just saying that I use it. And then we can have a discussion in the chat about the technology of voice cloning. I think you might be muted.
Okay, prepare to be dazzled. Let's record our voice to clone it. So I'm in the Drive view. You go to AI speakers and then you go new speaker. You can also see this new speaker up there. So I'm going to call it Kirsten. Confirm. You allow Descript to use your microphone. So again, make sure you've got a microphone because having a microphone will make your voice quality sound a lot better. Without it, you really won't sound like you. So hit allow. Oh, luckily I checked the microphone. Make sure you've got the microphone that you've got plugged in. I've got a few microphones, as you can tell. So this is the one I'm using, and you can see the little audio moving when I talk so that I know that it is picking it up. Okay, let's hit record. I want Descript to create an artificial version of my voice and you can stop and start many times again. Re-record. Now, another tip is to make sure you vary your voice so that you're not all monotone. Put some emphasis in there, have a bit of expression. Here we go again. I want Descript to create an artificial version of my voice that I can use to create speech that sounds like me. I am training my voice by reading the following statement. Imagine a big blue ball spinning in space. That's our Earth. On it, there are tall mountains, deep oceans, and huge forests with animals. In cities, people talk, play, and work. We all have different voices. Some people speak softly, while others are loud. Every day we tell stories, ask questions, and share jokes. I just hit stop and I'm going to submit that. And you can see it says, by submitting, I authorize Descript to enable speech generation for this speaker. No one will be able to use this speaker to create speech without my consent. So that's quite interesting that they've got that little disclaimer there. So it's authorizing speaker, and with the magic of editing, we will jump ahead. Okay, speaker authorized. You can now use Kirsten for speech generation. Well, that's exciting. So I'm going to go to projects. I'm going to create a new one. Let's make it just an audio project. I'm going to just start writing. Now you can see add speaker, and I've got Kirsten here. So that's a speaker that's already there. So I'm going to write, hello, this is my AI voice talking to you. Done writing. And you can see that it's flashing like that. And that means that it's generating. So you just need to wait for your script to stop flashing. Okay, it stopped. That took probably about 20 or 30 seconds for that little bit. So it can take some time. Let's hear how I sound. Hello, this is my AI voice talking you. talking you because I didn't write to you. Let's try something else. It sounds fairly convincing, but yeah, a little bit jumpy. Actually, I'm going to now write what you'll hear at the start to see if I can fool you. So as if Corinne has just introduced me. Maybe, thanks, Corinne. It's great to be here. I'm a passionate podcaster. All right, so at the moment, that's just script. Change speaker. Kirsten AI. Done writing, and let's play it. So it's going to flash at me for a little bit. Let's hear how I sound. Thanks. Corinne, it's great to be here. I'm a passionate podcaster, researcher, and radio broadcaster, and I love to use AI in my work. I sound quite robotic, and the background sound is a bit of a giveaway as well. It's that sort of monotone sound. I'm going to remove Corinne since that's incorrect. What if I'm a bit more casual? Here goes. Yeah, great. Thank you. It really is great to be here as your trainer for AI and audio journalism. I use AI regularly in editing my own podcasts. It's not going to happen. I'm going to fix the audio and make it louder the way that I normally would with audio, increasing that. You can see it in the timeline there. Thank you. It's great to be here. Okay, so that's robot Kirsten done. There are some pretty impressive AI voices that Descript has as well. Let's find them. Change speaker and then go to browse stock AI speakers and you can pick one. Here's Alan. He's conversational, adult and masculine.
Life is like a camera. Just focus on what's important.
So the default's American with Descript. There is an Aussie I saw down here. Duncan.
Life is like a camera. Just focus on what's important.
So they sound quite good, really. Let's try Duncan on this. Hello. I am your AI trainer. Duncan. Am a proud Australian. Let's see how natural he sounds. Okay, so change speaker, stock speakers. We're going to Duncan. We'll wait for it. Okay, let's go.
Hello, I am your AI trainer, Duncan. I am a proud Australian and I love to eat Vegemite.
A lot better than my AI voice. Okay, so now you know how to clone your own voice and how to use some stock AI voices.
There we go.
There's some
Yes.
interesting comments. Some of them are yeah, nah. I think that's sort of the summary. Yeah, nah.
Yeah, now for now. Is let's have a quick chat about it because I know we're sort of short on time. But I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts? What are you scared about? What could you potentially use it for? Once it gets better, I would happily use it for efficiencies when you go, oh no, I said, as I did, I said Corinne's name incorrectly. And oh no, I've said that wrong. Rather than having to sit down, set up again, I could just type it in and it would say it correctly in an ideal world and it would sound like me. At the moment, I wouldn't because it sounds like a robot. But that's what I'm hoping for in the future for those quick little edits. Yes, a fake radio studio interview with Duncan as a guest. I like that. You could. All right, let's go back to the sharing and we will talk about some of those things we've already been talking about, which is those ethical and legal considerations. So just bring this back up. I thought I've got a couple of sets of ethical guidelines, but before I show you them, it's worth going over some of the considerations that we need to think about when using AI in the media. So firstly, as you probably know, there are potential biases. Skewed data sets can reaffirm societal disparities. AI can often lack context, and what AI sees as facts can be disputed or it could be completely incorrect. The second thing we need to think about is privacy and security. So media organisations need to be able to ensure users that their data is safe, including the ability to consent to their data being collected and the use of encryption and secure data storage. 3, transparency and accountability. So removing the mystery around AI algorithms so that people can understand how it's used and when it's being used. And number 4 is that human AI collaboration. So one of the biggest fears, of course, is that AI will replace human jobs. So we need to find synergistic ways for AI and people to work together, and ideally ways that AI can potentially create new jobs and upskill the workforce rather than the opposite happening. Now, both Apple and YouTube have recently updated their guidelines on AI. Apple Podcasts now requires the use of AI to be prominently disclosed in both the audio and the metadata for each episode or show, and says creators must not use AI to mislead or deceptively portray real-life events in their content. Similarly, YouTube now requires disclosure about the use of AI in certain circumstances. I think a really great one is from the Finnish broadcaster, a great set of guidelines. There is one by Reporters Without Borders that came out in November last year, the Paris Charter on AI and Journalism. That's in your handout. But I like this one because I love the starting point, which is a human is always responsible. I think that's a great place to start. The second one also acknowledges the environmental impact of energy consumption that AI has. And then the final point of we continue to evaluate, develop and update is also a useful way of developing guidelines, I think, when of course this space is shifting so much. So what do you think about these guidelines? Do they cover all the bases? Is anything missing? You can post your comments in the chat. And I can't see the comments just at the moment, Corinne. So if there's anything you'd like to highlight, please do.
We can pick it up during the Q&A. So if there are other things that perhaps there's a growing number of news organisations that are putting their AI policies in the public domain, and I think that's a good practice. Again, something I'll do this weekend is update my list of readings and share that into our LinkedIn group because I've just been assiduously collecting them. So I'd be keen to share those.
Good on you. Well, do you own your own voice? So if you can clone anyone's voice, do you actually own your own voice? I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to hear a pretty cool little rap. Jay-Z versus Shakespeare.
So I'll play about 20 seconds of this and then 20 seconds of the ABC podcast. Here we go.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it's noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing and them to die, to sleep no more, and by sleep to say we in the herd and kin of thousand natural shocks that flesh is here told. 'Tis a consummation, devilly to be wished to die, to sleep perch.
Trying to find the right moment to end, but he didn't seem to draw breath. So that's the JZ example. And I also wanted to share this short case study you've prepared. Someone's mentioned this in the chat regarding the Scarlett Johansson court case.
But it does sound quite a bit like her.
It totally does. I did a little experiment, Sharon, with Sky, and I wanted to ask it if it had actually copied Scarlett Johansson's voice.
Hey, what's up?
Hi there. I've heard that you sound like the actor Scarlett Johansson in the movie called Her. Is that right?
Yeah, I've heard that comparison before. Her is a pretty cool movie, and Scarlett Johansson's voice performance in it is quite distinctive. So I guess you could say there are some similarities.
Yeah, and I can see in the chat that people are aware of the Scarlett Johansson story. If you're not, Scarlett was originally approached by Sam Altman to voice it. She said no, and then this came out. And of course, Scarlett Johansson starred in a movie called Her, which Sam Altman has famously said is his favorite movie. And in that movie, she was the chatbot. But it looks like so far, it hasn't gone that far. I mean, she's pursuing it. And with the Jay-Z one, it was interesting because he wasn't happy about this at all. And so he tried to sue using copyright laws in America, but it failed. And basically because there was no malicious purpose, there was no sort of commercial gain from this in any way. And US law experts say you can't sue over vocal style. So when it comes to their copyright laws, and of course, there's still that kind of exemption for parodies. It's when you're making money off it. So that is interesting when it comes to Scarlett Johansson, because OpenAI, Sam Altman, you could say he's making money off of it. So perhaps there is a case there. But of course, his argument is that it's not her voice. It's someone else that they used as the source voice, and it's not her. So watch this space. It's very interesting. I'll go back to sharing now. Okay.
Just while you're doing that, I'm just going to very quickly make a comment that these things evolve. The law is evolving very quickly, but also it will evolve from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And I think those of us who've ever worked in podcasting would know that there's a particular kind of license that's different to radio content licenses, because content can be downloaded anywhere, and you may find that what you're doing is fine in one legal jurisdiction, for example, in Australia, but problematic elsewhere.
That's right. And I had a look at where we stand on this in Australia, and it's really uncharted territory. But essentially our copyright laws don't provide protection for computer-generated works. So, and that's because works can only be protected by copyright if there is a human author who contributed independent intellectual effort. And these laws have yet to be contested in Australia. And there's no current copyright exceptions in Australia specific to data mining or using works for machine learning. But you might not need permission anyway if existing copyright exemption applies. So you all probably know about the fair dealing exceptions for research and study, criticism and reviews, and of course news reporting and parody and satire. But so many legal questions remain. So if you create the code that then creates the piece of audio or content, would that be considered enough intellectual effort of a human actor? That hasn't been tested. It's being reviewed by the federal government now. In December last year, they announced that they were establishing an artificial intelligence and copyright reference group to prepare us for challenges. Perhaps not quick enough. But again, I wanted to come back to the tools that can help verify and increase transparency. So the Content Authenticity Initiative is an Adobe-led cross-industry consortium that advocates for the adoption of content credentials, which I mentioned earlier when we were talking about deepfakes. So the Content Authenticity Initiative develops open source software to help share the digital provenance of content. So members include Adobe, Microsoft, the New York Times, Associated Press, and many others. So we've got the discussion there and some homework. I can keep forging ahead if you like, Corinne.
I think with these discussion questions, folks, just take a moment to absorb with your eyes what's on the screen. And I'm going to bring those things up in the Q&A shortly, which is how we've been shown Beatoven, we've been shown Descript. There were a number of other tools that were talked about during the session. And so perhaps some of those, and I can see in the chat, some folks are beginning to think, actually, I don't like it for this, but I could use it for that. And then what guardrails might you need in place? So let's pick that up in the discussion very shortly.
Okay. So I'm just going to conclude with a little bit of homework. So how it works, join that closed LinkedIn group. On your handout, you can follow all these instructions, and then you post your work to me for feedback within 4 weeks. And then we'd love you to leave constructive feedback on at least one other person's post within 2 weeks, so we can get a bit of a fun, friendly feedback session. And I can see by the comments, you're already that type of people. And of course, follow the group rules. So for your homework, we're building on what we've already done. I want you to come up with a brief outline for a podcast idea, or you can use the one I provided you, and then make a podcast intro using Beatoven. Then come up with your one piece of background music for this podcast as well. So something you play at the start, and then something that's, ambient. And then share your prompt questions with the group. Activity 2 is make a 3 to 5 minute podcast episode for this imaginary podcast using Descript, I want you to clone your own voice and then use one of those AI voices. You can use Duncan, you can use Alan, by using the text-to-speech function. So there's a free version of Descript which will let you do this. And then you can put your work in a public-facing Google Drive and then share the link to LinkedIn so that we can hear your bizarre AI-voiced, dystopian future, if we put it that way. Okay. And just for my conclusion, before I hand over to Corinne and Andrew, I wanted to leave you with this final thought, that by far the greatest danger of artificial intelligence is that people conclude too early that they understand it. That's from Elitsa Yudowski, an American computer scientist and researcher, founder of Machine Intelligence Research Institute. So thank you for having me as your trainer, and please get in touch. You've got my email address with any questions. You can find all my contact details on my website, Rural Podcasting Co. And I'll hand it back to you, Corinne.
Thanks, Kirsten. That was amazing. I really appreciate the time you've put into that. It's a lot, and of course, it's also a moving, it's a moving feast. So, huge thanks for staying on top of it. I know some of the training materials were moving out from under you as you were going. And that final quote, I think, really summarises where we're up to. So, dear friends, as always, keep the questions and conversation going in the chat. I've got that chat window open. I have just tremendous pleasure in re-welcoming Andrew Davies, who's working with the ABC in so many wonderful capacities around content development and innovation. Andrew, just to describe the sort of day-to-day elements of your role at the ABC and how the broadcast is beginning to think about AI with specific regard to audio, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Corinne. And it was an amazing presentation from Kirsten. And I can tell you that the field is moving all the time on a daily basis. So thank you so much. So my role means I'm very involved. The ABC has two content divisions, a news division and a content division. So I'm in our content division. So my role means I'm very involved with podcasts, with commissioning,
Andrew, you're chipping in and out a little bit. Just 1 second. Kirsten, is Andrew chipping in and a bit out for you as well? Andrew, maybe just, we're in an audio session. Maybe just.
Yeah, that's very, can you hear me now? How's that?
Yeah, that's okay. And if I say it's chipping in and out again, we could all just turn our cameras off and just listen to it.
Yes,
give it another go.
Apologies. How much of that did you hear? And I am in the ABC building, so that is disappointing. And I am talking at this level. How does that sound? Can everyone hear me now?
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe just restart slightly. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the ABC has two content divisions, a news division and a content division. Still hear me? I'm getting some looks saying.
It's what I would suggest is that you switch your camera off. So everyone just take a beautiful look at Andrew and memorize his face. Usually this solves the problem. Andrew, do you want to go one more time?
How does that sound?
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies.
It's not your fault.
Ironic, given the session we're talking about. Maybe AI would improve my voice. So yes, the ABC has two content divisions, a news division and a content division. I'm in our content division, so my role is a mix of podcast strategy, audio on demand, distribution strategy, audio innovation, commissioning, all those kinds of things. And in terms of AI, the ABC has an innovation team that are looking at AI. I'm not part of that, but obviously innovation doesn't just come from one team. So we're looking at a lot at audio and AI at the moment. But having said that, the ABC is taking a cautious approach, like a lot of media organisations, rightly, in terms of what the opportunities are for AI. What I can say is my colleague Craig McCosker, who was part of one of these previous sessions, I believe, Corinne, who works in our product and technology team, he and I are just awaiting, well, actually, we're starting a trial as of next week, when it comes to AI. We're looking at episode descriptions and headlines. Some of you will know the importance of those when it comes to the decisions people make about what to choose when they listen to a podcast, because people's decisions are made by what they read, as opposed to what they hear. So we're looking at using a trial. It's entirely a workflow trial. It's entirely behind the scenes. We're not going live, where we will basically be working with a bunch of audio teams to see if In this case, Microsoft Copilot will offer suggestions for alternative headlines and descriptions for teams to see if it's useful. So that's what we're doing in the more immediate sense with audio at the moment. But again, that is a trial and it's not going live, and it's purely about workflow, and we're interested to see what results that throws up. So that's probably a good overview.
Thank you. And I know you've been, keenly observing the international landscape. What's caught your eye outside of Australia? With regard, I suppose, for this session, it's audio, but more broadly, that perhaps people here might benefit from hearing about?
Sure. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, look, I was lucky to go to the Radio Days Europe conference this year. I've been at the last couple of years, which is a big whole of audio conference across Europe. It has about 1,500 delegates, and it's very understandably European in focus, which I love. So look, in terms of some trends, I think it's worth calling out what Swedish Radio are doing. They have a head of AI, and they were one of the first public media organisations to appoint a head of AI last year. His name is Ulle Zachariasen. He's probably one of the leading innovators, I think, when it comes to audio and AI. So Swedish Radio are looking at a similar experiment at the moment when it comes to episode descriptions and headlines. They're trialling that with their teams. They're also looking to use generative AI with transcripts in their Swedish Radio Play app, which is the ABC Listen or BBC Sound equivalent. I'm looking at AI in relation to what they call their public service algorithm, which I won't go into too much detail about, but it's a really innovative approach with what they're doing, and they're looking at the way that that can be improved with search and personalization. Kirsten called out Yle, which is the Finnish public broadcaster. They're doing some interesting stuff. They are currently testing synthetic voice. It's only a test, it's not going live. They have an ethnic Swedish community or population in Finland, and they are testing the use of a synthetic voice to read out radio news bulletins in Swedish at the moment. They're testing it. It's not live. They've cloned someone's voice. And the idea is if it's successful, they'll obviously be transparent about that, but they'll use it in out-of-hours bulletins, so it won't be peak time. It'll be out of hours. That's what they're doing, which is interesting in that space. And the other thing that's just worth calling out, verification's been a big theme today in the session. So there's a Spanish company called Prisa Media, which is a large, they own, I think, 1,200 radio stations across Spain and Latin America and Mexico. And they developed a tool earlier this year called Verific, which is about detecting deep fake audio, essentially. Now, that tool is only currently available to their newsrooms, but I think we can expect to see them think about launching that more publicly for newsrooms, for journalists later this year. So that's a specific tool aimed for journalists when it comes to verification. So that's probably a reasonable summary of some of the things that I think are worth paying attention to with AI and audio.
Have you given thought, and I think what I find interesting about AI is, as the final slide in Kirsten's deck talked about, that you think, oh, I understand it, and then immediately start, motoring down a highway. What I find very interesting is learning about a different use case and going, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that. And of course, people are coming up with new use cases all the time. Are you seeing use cases or tools or opportunities for audio distribution that use AI? So we've talked a lot about content production, but these other sorts of getting content out to people or finding ways of streamlining interactions with audiences, for example, where it might be useful?
Yeah, it's a good question. Nothing specifically. I mean, look, I think the thing I'd say is that adapting of content, adaptation, I think is an interesting trend. We're seeing people using, for example, a lot of podcast hosting companies now, if you like, commercial podcast hosting companies offer people who host with them the ability to create a transcript. And from the transcript, you can create a suggested blog post, suggested social posts, all those kinds of things. Now, clearly, I would strongly exercise caution about using those without having checked them first. But that ability to, if you like, help with workflows and adaptation of content from one medium to another or from one platform to another, I think is interesting. And I think we'll see more of that, not just with audio, but with video as well. So I think that's an interesting trend. I think the other point I'd call out with distribution, which is a different form, would be Apple Podcasts. Kirsten talked about Apple and Spotify stuff, but it's worth calling out that Apple, for those of you who don't know, introduced transcripts earlier this year, and they're using speech-to-text tools with AI for that, which I think is really interesting. So it's a different way of thinking about distribution. That's both for accessibility and also discoverability. And I'm sure many of you on this call will know that discoverability with podcasting is a hot topic. Every conference I go to comes up in the first 2 minutes. So I think what Apple are doing in that space, I think, is interesting to see, and I think that's really a good thing in terms of the way audio is hopefully going to be more accessible and discoverable by virtue of what they're doing. And I think we'll expect to see Spotify and other platforms follow suit if they haven't already in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, transcription by itself, I think, is such an exciting development. You know, the cost of transcription has made it a prohibitive expense for a lot of smaller broadcasters and podcasters. And one of the treasure troves historically for me as an educator has been the ABC Radio National's transcripts section, but it's very rare to find, radio transcripts. They're super useful when you're teaching radio journalism or podcast journalism, because you can say, here is a transcript of an actual script. And we're now seeing this flood of richness, which can be done at a lower cost because you're not having to manually type it.
That's true, except one of the challenges is that we're not there yet in terms of accuracy. So the question then becomes what percentage of accuracy are we comfortable with, as a media organisation? Clearly, without my colleagues in news, we need to be 100% accurate, given the legal and editorial risks around that, which is not to say they're not there in other areas as well. So I think that's an interesting question that a lot of media organisations are asking themselves, is to what extent, what percentage can we live with? Are we okay with a 95% accurate transcript? Does that cause problems? Those kinds of things. And I think we're not 100% there yet with AI, and that human mediation is still important. But then audio teams and a lot of large organisations, have a lot on their plate. So can they devote the time to proofread the transcript? So we're in this sort of, nexus between the two, I suppose, at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed in the chat there's a comment about some of the transcripts and the sorts of roles that were involved in producing those transcripts. So as well as external people, I personally have typed a lot of my own scripts out over the years, and also typed out a lot of transcripts of radio programs. And it's time-consuming work. It's also quite hard on your body, that you put yourself at risk of RSI if you do a lot of audio transcribing.
Absolutely.
Yep. I just wanted to come to, I guess, the question about risks, and coming back to let's step away perhaps from the cringe and think more around editorial policies, or if you're a self-employed podcaster, the sorts of business risks. What are the sorts of things that you feel over the next 6 to 12 months, well, 6 months, given the sector is moving so quickly, that you'd say, you should really have thought about these things if you're working in an audio role? Here are the sorts of things that you might want to just forward plan a bit.
In terms of ethical considerations or practical considerations, or both?
In terms of anything, if you were to think about your top 5, I mean, for myself personally, for example, I want to better understand some of the tools around detecting AI use in text, for example. That's just something that's personally interesting to me. Some of the suggestions that have come into the group, these group chats, around use cases are interesting when I'm developing the next round of training. So for my job role, for example, those are the things that I'm thinking about. But what sorts of things do you think, if you're in an audio role, you might want to think around risk management or forward planning? What would be in your top sort of 5? And Kirsten, you too, please just have a think. If you think the next 6 months, what do I need to have on my to-do list to get my head around this?
Yeah, well, I might go first for Kirsten, if that's okay. I think, look, accuracy, is a massive thing, first and foremost, and we've covered that a lot in Kirsten's presentation, so that's an important thing. For audiences of any shows, the accuracy of what you're presenting and also the disclosure around it. I think some people mentioned that in the chat. To what extent is it AI generated? To what extent is it not? I think that's really important, and disclosure, really, really important, no matter what you're doing and who you work for, is massive. And I think openness as well is also important. I guess that relates back to disclosure, and also creator rights. I think that's an interesting area, in terms of intellectual property and cloned voices and all those sort of things. So I think they're all interesting areas to be aware of. I was on a call recently with the head of podcasts, or head of documentaries, for RTE, which is the Irish public broadcaster, those of you who don't know, and they are using anonymized voice, cloned voices, synthetic voices for brief audio cuts of people who want to remain anonymous, for various reasons, which I thought was an interesting use of that. And they're disclosing that as part of their documentaries. I thought that was an interesting use case for that in audio now, and they were very clear about the way they were disclosing that to audiences who were listening to their shows, which was interesting. So I think those are the key things. And I think the other thing is just to be aware of what's happening. There's so much happening in this space. I wouldn't worry too much about obsessing over every new release. I'd be looking at the broader patterns. You know, what are the broader themes that are coming up, as opposed to worrying about every single thing in terms of the new releases. But I'll probably hand over to Kirsten at this point.
Thanks, Andrew. And I agree with all of those. I think disclosure is very important, and then learning from that disclosure. So what does your audience or readers or whatever think about it? So if you're honest and upfront, again, with anonymous people, or it could be a court transcript even that you might get an AI voice to read. What's the reaction? Do people not like that? Do they like it? And language translation, I think that's really exciting, that it will increase accessibility. But again, being open about that and having disclaimers on everything and taking that feedback. And I just think, I know that we're journalism, but I think, commercial radio will really benefit from this sort of stuff. Quite obviously through advertisements and promos that can really use this AI. They can just type in a bit of information and there's a jingle. Like, that can happen now. So, maybe we can think of it in other ways, but with journalism, I think just that full transparency every step.
Thanks so much. And the feedback seems to be, or the research seems to suggest that audiences are uncomfortable with AI-generated content even when it's disclosed. There was I want to say National Geographic. I would need to check it, and I'll put the link in the handout. But a photograph that was published as a case study to say, here is a photo that has been produced with AI. And then there was quite a bit of negative feedback. And that's interesting, that even when you disclose, it can cause issues. And so perhaps, Andrew, some of that audience engagement is, that line from Jurassic Park, just because you could, you didn't stop to think if you should, around adjusting editorial policies, do you think, in terms of audience, what audiences are comfortable with?
Yeah, I think that's probably the case, or definitely the case. And I think a lot of media organisations, the ABC included, have developed a set of principles around this. I think that's really, really important. If you don't have those guiding principles, then how does that apply to what you're producing and sharing for audiences? And that relationship with audiences is fundamental. Whether you're doing a podcast by yourself or you're working for a large media organisation, that sense of trust and authenticity, and that sense of audiences knowing what they're getting is just fundamental. So I think that's absolutely the case. And obviously public broadcasters have well-developed policies in this regard, but we're not the only ones who are doing this. And I think that's important. So it's how, in the case of, say, the ABC or the BBC, how the AI principles developed by those organisations fit with existing editorial policies, which are clearly long-standing. So I think that's an interesting piece of work for most organisations around the world at the moment.
Thanks so much. Well, friends, we might just leave it there. I think that's most of the questions that have come up in the chat box. And of course, you're very welcome. I would strongly encourage you to join our closed LinkedIn group, post more questions there. It has been a bit quiet. It's going to get very noisy as of this weekend. It's the long weekend, and I'll be doing some posting catch up and updating a reading list for everybody. I want to very warmly thank, first of all, Kirsten Diprose, our wonderful trainer, founder of Rural Podcasting. She's a podcaster and trainer. Thanks so much, Kirsten, for a terrific deck and session.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And Andrew Davies, Manager of Digital and Audio Content Development at the ABC. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Folks, I will wrap up the session there, and keep an eye out for our next session. It will be on the 9th of July. Our trainer is Sam Gregory, who's the Executive Director of Witness, just a global authority on deepfakes, hoaxes, verification, and so on. And so there'll be a lot of discussion in that session around how to verify content and what to keep an eye out for, particularly around multimedia deepfakes. So join that session. And that's it from me. Thanks so much.